Go and try it.
What was your favorite part about working on the vehicle?
Getting it to run.
How long did you think that it was going to originally take?
Not too long. I had to take the starter out like 2 or 3 times, so I didn't think it was gonna be a short process.
We were at a swap meet and just picking up old parts and things like that for some of his cars and some of my more recent versions. And a guy had one for sale on the last day, and I just started haggling with him, and I didn't really want one, never even drove one, never even owned one, and ended up leaving with one, and it kind of took off from there. There's an old joke among Model T restorers. Typically the guys that are interested in these say, I'd really like to have like 1 or 2 good running Model Ts that I can use on a regular basis, and now I'm down to 7 so far. So it's kind of like, they're kind of addictive, and so once you get one, then you tend to run into more of them, and so right now between my brother and I, we have 5, and he's restoring a very early, a 1919 model right now, and he did a lot of the work and helped me get this one up into where it would roll and everything, and then basically got it running this summer and real superficially, and then we brought it here, and then of course the guys, I wanted them to kind of see how the advent of the automobile actually started. They're so very crude and very agricultural, and so I wanted them to see that the #1 selling vehicle in the world for the past 25 years has been the Ford F-150 pickup, and I want them to see where it originated is this truck right here. So that was kind of the basis of us kind of getting interested in these. I have like several old Ford pickups, and it's just kind of been a thing that I've started kind of collecting them. So that one, as best we can tell, is a 1925. There's some 24 parts on it. It's hard to tell. Over the course of 90 years, things get exchanged and rearranged and modified and that kind of thing. So it's you have to kind of go with the predominant number of parts that are on it and trace some serial numbers. So the frames themselves were not numbered, and so there's no way to really trace the history of that particular complete vehicle. We can only go by an engine number. And that could have been exchanged, 10 or 15 times over the course of that. So as best we can tell, like I say, it has all of the pieces of a late 1924, 25 car. You would think that a car that is almost 100 years old, parts would be hard to find. Actually, you can buy practically every brand new part for that car somewhere in the world, because they sold so many and because it's such a historical vehicle that there's people that specialize just in every new component for that car. You could build one of those if you had a frame, which are very easy to find, by the way, frames themselves. Now the rest of it gets harder, but you could build a brand new vehicle. It'd cost about $30,000 to do it, but you could build a brand new vehicle out of parts that are available for them, largely. Because they're so different than the things that they've learned about, everything has to be retaught, basically, because there's no electronics that control different systems of the car. There's no hydraulics, I mean, everything is just kind of start from scratch, and it's closer to a lawnmower than it is a car by today's standards, and just because of the simplicity of it and the way that it functions. So it's harder for them to kind of grasp a lot of the systems on that vehicle, because it is radically different than anything we drive currently. If something fails on that vehicle, it's much easier to fix, because they were designed to be repaired and maintained by people who had no experience mechanically at all. And remember, that car came about in a time period when there were no roads, there were no paved roads. The closest thing you came to paved roads were brick streets that larger cities had, and outside of that, you get out of town, there were no paved roads at all. And most people lived in rural communities that owned those types of cars. And so they had to be able to service it themselves. So that, therefore, it's very simple if you understand the real theory behind the way these kind of vehicles work. On this car, if I was to drive it to Wichita, it would require me to plan carefully for tire failures and things like that, because that is just a routine that whenever you go more than 50 miles, there's a distinct possibility that you're going to run into some sort of mechanical problem that you have to be prepared to solve. You obviously don't find parts just by stopping into a local dealership. And so everything requires a little bit of thought. And much like the time period in which it was new, to drive from here to downtown Wichita would have been an all-day event, and probably even you would spend the night and come back the next day. And so we don't think in those terms, especially with, you can go to Wichita and be back before, lunch. That just wasn't the case when this car came about. So you have to be rather handy. You have to be able to make adjustments and things like that along the way that you would not make on a modern car.
Do you want to kind of talk us through like what you did to restore the vehicle?
It took every nut and bolt apart. Literally, the frame has been changed out, the engine has been completely gone through. Now, my students didn't do the engine on this car. My brother did a lot of it with me, and we worked together on that during the summer. And even last summer, we worked it over some. And so it's been a process of about 2 years getting this to this position. And so the students were able to disassemble, repaint, and kind of reconfigure this car to a large extent. But the deep mechanical work was done by my brother and myself. Every part on that car has been all over the garage, though. There's been not a single nut or bolt was left in its place originally. It's been completely taken apart. And so either myself or my brother to a large extent assisted me with getting it all together. No one person can do this, but it's interesting. Go on to a website. There's plenty of them out there where you can see the Model T assembly record. I think they can completely assemble a Model T in less than 15 minutes from an assembled engine and final drive. Now, that's not every single part, but they put all the wheels, build the frame up, put the radiator in it, oil, engine mounted, and all that kind of stuff, and they can do it in like 15 minutes. Some of the teams do it. It's kind of interesting to watch.